So guys, welcome to Crazy Burger. So today, this is a follow-up video to the 10 games you probably never played on the Evercade. This is part 2. Now if you've not seen the first part, I'll leave a link in the description. We're going to have a look at 10 more games that you probably never played on the Evercade. Now we've got a bit of a lull at the moment in the Evercade market because we're still waiting on the next releases. At the time of this video it's going to be March 2022. So we've got a bit of a lull, so I thought we might as well look at some of the back catalogue of Evercade and have a look at some of the games we've probably never played or looked at or give any time of day at all. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay guys, we're going to start on the Namco Collection 1 and a game called Rabble, which is a kind of a, I don't know the best way to describe it, it's kind of like a snake style game where you sort of need to trap all the sort of monsters using a combination of blue and red, and it's the left D-pad and the buttons. It's very strange to sort of describe, but it's actually not bad, and I definitely haven't gave this game any time at all. So you've got your red sort of arrow which you use with the D-pad, the blue arrow you move with the sort of combination of the buttons, and you obviously need to sort of go around and sort of trap the treasure, and as we go into the levels you see you sort of trap the monsters as well. Trap all the monsters or mushrooms and move on to the next level. It's as simple as that, and it definitely reminded me of a kind of a snake style game in that aspect, and do you know what, it's not bad. It sort of grows on you once you realise what you need to actually do. It is hard to get around sort of utilising red and blue at the same time. Like if I suppose if you can imagine you can play the drumsticks or pat your head and rub your bell at the same time, that's the kind of thing, and I'm useless at that. But so I really just use the red arrow at the one time because that's all I'm good at. But maybe you'll find it different. But you see here, you nearly need to try and trap all the mushrooms. Obviously that monster at the back there is kind of cutting your wire as you're going around, so you can try and trap that as well, and you can try and trap the monsters. Don't touch the monsters or you'll die. You need to start again. It's pretty simple really, but do you know, it is kind of addictive, and I'm kind of surprised I actually missed this one originally. I never really gave it any thought or time at all, maybe because I didn't know how to play it, but it's definitely worth a look. Okay guys, moving on to Atari Collection 2 and a game called Planet Smashers, which is an Atari 7800 game, and it's a pretty simple game. There's nothing really much to it. You really just, it's a kind of shoot 'em up, and you need to really destroy all the other enemies. Pretty simple stuff really, not overly complicated, but I've never really played it, hardly touched it at all, and it's not bad. It's actually quite cool. It's obviously you can play 2 players as well, but you can see it's pretty straightforward. You've got your basic shooting button. I think there is some other sort of weapon options as well, but you've got collectibles, usually upgrade your weapons, and that's it. It's really quite basic. I don't think it's an amazing game, but you know, it's got some playability. If you like your sort of shoot 'em ups, you might get something from this game. There's plenty sort of going on, but it's not the most difficult game at all. There's obviously not a lot going on the screen, it's just pretty basic, but it starts off obviously eases you in. And it's not bad at all, but I've definitely not gave this game any time at all. Obviously shoot 'em ups aren't really my favourite type of thing, which is maybe a lot of the games in this series is probably shoot 'em ups because I've really never gave them any time because I'm not a fan of the genre, but it doesn't mean there's some really decent games out there that should really be sort of played. And this is probably one of them, definitely worth a look. Okay guys, staying with Atari Collection 2, we're going to play Radar Lock, and it's another shoot 'em up, it's pretty straightforward, and amazingly I didn't realise it was released in 1989, which is, I guess, is quite late in the Atari 2600 sort of life, but it kind of steals a lot of the graphics and sound from the game Solaris, which was released a few years before it. But it's not got the depth of Solaris. It's really just like a kind of a shoot 'em up. You can see in the bottom right you've got your sort of missile command style sort of guns that you've got available, or amount of ammo you've still got, and it's basically kill everything that appears on the screen, just survive. Then at the end of the level you need to try and refuel, and then you move on to the next level. It's pretty straightforward, simple, so it utilises some of the sort of shooting aspects of Solaris and sort of makes a sort of simple shoot 'em up game from it, basically, and it's not bad. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. It's worth a little play. Okay guys, moving on to Interplay Collection 2 and a game called Claymates, which I've never really played. I played it very, very briefly and then never came back to it. Not entirely sure why, so I'm going to have another little look at it and see what it's all about. And it's obviously made from the same makers of Clay Fighter, which I wasn't a big fan of, but this is probably a lot more playable. You sort of play, it's kind of quirky, very unusual. Obviously it's a clay ball, and you can transform into different sort of animals and shapes as you go through the levels, and it's kind of odd, but it's got some really nice elements to it. I guess you need to go around the levels, you transform into different sort of animals. You can speed through this as well, collecting all the gems, and you're obviously against the clock. You can basically beat up the other animals, take a hit and you sort of transform back into this ball thing, and that's it. It's actually worth a play. It's pretty cool, and I'm sort of a big fan of platforming games. And there's definitely a lot going for this. It's got more playability, I think, than Clay Fighters games themselves, but I'm surprised I've gave this one a miss. It ain't bad at all. I think one of the aspects I probably gave up with it is it does get pretty hard, and gets a little bit frustrating, but it's definitely worth a play. Just sort of take your time, if you can. Obviously, sort of whizzing through this part is probably okay, but try to do that through the rest of the level is pretty much pointless, and it's not possible. But there's a lot of crazy aspects going on. It's very quirky, very unusual, some great styling, and yeah, give it a try. Okay, so we're moving on to Mega Cat Collection 1 and a game called Super Painter. Now, I have definitely played this game and I've finished it. It's only got 16 levels, but it's a fun game. But I never hear this one get mentioned in any groups or forums, and no one ever really talks about it, which is a shame because I think it's a really cool game and it should be played. It's only 16 levels. The idea of the game is to try and colour all those grey platforms with, I guess, your paint, and get to the exit, and that's it. Obviously it sounds very simple, kind of a puzzle style game, but it's very hard. I think the controls are a bit slippy, which doesn't help sort of the difficult level. It makes it a lot harder than it probably should be, but it is really fun. It's good, a good challenge. I really enjoyed it, and it's definitely worth a play. Okay guys, moving on to Pico Collection 1, one of the earlier carts, which was one of the best earlier releases. And I'm going to play a game called Magic Girl, which is, yep, it's another shooter. And it's a really decent one, and it's one I've definitely rarely played. I played it I think once, briefly, and it's not the hardest shoot 'em up. It's easy to jump into, it's very colourful, very bright. Unusual game called Magic Girl. Sort of bizarre plot going on, but there's a lot going on for it. You see, it looks absolutely fantastic. It plays really well. It's not the hardest game. It's not like a one-hit sort of kill scenario. You can see on the right-hand side, you've got a sort of health bar which sort of helps, meaning you can probably survive a lot longer. For me, I prefer shoot 'em ups that are not one-hit kills because I'm absolutely terrible at them, and I would get really frustrated. So having a health bar sort of helps, and sort of helps you try and enjoy that game rather than being frustrated by it. It's definitely worth a look. I think it's really quite cool. The levels themselves do get a little bit repetitive and go on probably a little longer than they should, and obviously at the end of each level you have your sort of boss battles, but I just feel as if the levels themselves could be being shortened just by a little bit, because they just seem to go on and on and on. But it's definitely worth a look. It's pretty cool. Okay, now we're moving on to Atari Lynx Collection 1 and a game called Remnant Planner Wars, in which, unbelievably, it's described as an action game, but it's actually another kind of a shooting game. And it obviously has a look of like Elite, I suppose, Elite Dangerous perhaps, but it's pretty straightforward. You're really just trying to destroy all the sort of enemies, which really just look like UFOs. Pretty simple, sort of moving up and down and just destroy them as they appear on screen or into your radar. And do you know, it's actually not bad. It's not really your typical sort of shoot 'em up game. It's pretty simple. I kind of quite enjoyed it. It's not got the most depth to it, I suppose, but it sort of looks more in depth than it actually is. It's actually pretty simple, easy to pick up, and definitely worth a quick 5-minute blast for sure. Okay, Atari Lynx Collection 2, and we're going to play another shoot 'em up, funny enough, called Zardlor Mercenary. And this one, it obviously looks a little bit rough at being a Atari Lynx game, but you know, it's actually pretty good. And I rarely played it. I think I played it once on the review video that I made, and that was it. I've never went back to it, which kind of feels a bit of a shame because it seems like a really decent sort of shoot 'em up, and it's definitely worth revisiting. Pretty straightforward. You've got a choice of characters at the start of the game. You've got a choice of sort of weapons as well. You've got a laser sort of and a missile button, and it's definitely worth sort of utilising both of them. You've got your collectibles here on the left, which sort of help your different weapons that you need. You've got speed up here as well. You know, it's a pretty decent enough game. It's good fun. There's lots of stuff going on. It's very busy. You know, I don't really know why I didn't bother. I guess because it's a shoot 'em up, I'm not really that fussed on them, but it really is worth a look. It is pretty decent. I really probably should have called this video 10 shoot 'em ups you've never played, but it just seems like most of them have been shoot 'em ups so far. But there are some really decent games here that definitely are worth second looks and play. That's for sure. This one is pretty decent. Definitely worth having a play. Okay, moving on to Codemasters 1, which is funny enough a cart I probably haven't played as much as I thought I might have, even though it's got Sensible Soccer and Cannon Fodder on it. So we're going to be playing Linus Spacehead, which it's a kind of a strange little game. You've basically crash landed in the middle of the ocean, and that's basically where it starts. You need to sort of escape the ocean, jumping on these bubbles, and then it moves on from there to another sort of few different levels where you need to collect parts, I guess, to try and, it sounds a bit like Alien Cat, collect the parts for your spaceship and get home. But this level itself is so frustrating, and it's probably one of the reasons why I never come back. I've played it a few different times, and sometimes it's pure random, I'll finish it easy, and other times I could be waiting about forever for these bubbles. You know, it's not bad, it's not the greatest game ever, but kind of a frustrating. Okay, surprisingly, moving on to Mega Cat Collection 2, which is probably my most played cart, but there's a game on it I've actually never really played, and that game's called Misplaced. I played it very briefly, got stuck and just gave up. And there's not a lot of people talking about this on the forums and on Facebook pages, for example. Nobody's really gave it any sort of thoughts or comments or time of day, and you know, it's probably a bit of a shame because there's a lot going on to it. It's obviously a bit of a puzzle game, and it does get very tricky. The basic part of it is that you really need to collect these red dots and place them on the sort of squares you can see on the left hand side to get the key to move on to the next level, and that's it. But there's a lot of different aspects to it where you need to utilise, and that's where it gets really tricky, and at times it gets a little bit confusing and frustrating in how to actually play it, and I think that's why I just gave up with it. I sort of lost the patience, but it definitely needs patience, time, and a little bit of understanding how the actual game mechanics work to sort of make some progress on it. And it's definitely worth a look. It's a really quirky looking sort of puzzle game. Not the best looking game, it has to be said, but it's definitely worth a little look. And this cart itself is fantastic, but this is the only game I really didn't give much of a look at all. Not sure if that's a good thing or bad thing, but definitely worth having a second look, and I think it's one of the games I'll definitely be going back to try and sort of make some progress. So this is one of the levels where you need to sort of create this kind of a bridge so that you can actually walk across to get to the sort of red sort of dot, and that's the part that kind of starts to get a little bit confusing. And I think what doesn't really help is probably the button mapping isn't particularly great, and you get a bit confused at what button you're supposed to be pressing. You end up pressing the wrong button and it cancels it. But it does get more complicated. Obviously this level is a simple, straightforward bridge you need to create to sort of walk the character across, but on other levels you really need to go around objects and all sorts of stuff, and it does get a little bit confusing and takes a lot of sort of brain power to try and understand, right, how does this work and how am I going to get across and then get back again. But yeah, it's an interesting little game. I don't think it's the best game on this cart, but it's interesting. It's definitely worth a little look. But you need to have a lot of patience, I think, for it. So guys, that's our look at 10 games you probably never played on the Evercade. Now please drop me some comments. Have you played these games? What do you think? Are there other games that you want me to sort of look at that you've probably never played? Let me know. Guys, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you again next time. Bye for now.